Good afternoon. Welcome to Marketplace Live from a not so sunny Cape Town. My name is Andrew Owens. I am Head of Engineering for Clearing and Interconnection at Teraco, a Digital Realty company, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by a good friend, Mark Tinka. Mark, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me over. I'm also Head of Engineering, as it were, but at SEACOM. Glad to be here to have this discussion with Andrew. We've been in the business together for a long time.
Yeah, and that's interesting and always great to chat to you. What a lot of people forget is that Jericho and Ccom sort of started up at the same time, and so we've been on this, I guess, sort of journey through the years. And I figured today we just wanted to chat about what we've seen in the market, and then I mean, we started about 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
What we've seen happening in the market, what's changed, and discuss maybe a few key points, and sort of put into place where we see things like data centers, subsea cables, carriers, and that sort of thing making a difference. And just from my perspective, since we are a data center company, I always like to tell the story about how I got into this business. Back in 2008, the directors of Teraco at that stage, I'd worked with them previously in a different company, and the CEO at the time phoned me and said, "We're starting this new business, and we would like you to come and join." And the business that we were in previously was an ISP, and I remember, back then when we didn't have data centers, data center was either a computer room, usually a broom closet where somebody just stuck an air conditioner in, and you had a couple of servers. And, I was a network admin at that place / developer. And I remember when that company was sold, I thought to myself, I'm so glad I don't have to deal with that computer room anymore, or that server room. And so the CEO phoned me and he said, "Okay, well, that one's done. We're starting this new one. Do you want to join?" I said, "Cool. As long as we're not building data centers, what are we doing?" They said, "We're building data centers." And so, we spent a lot of time sort of trying to get the market to understand what a data center is, or what co-location is. And as much as, you guys are involved in subsea and that sort of thing, everything has its place, and everything needs to work together to work properly. And I think getting people to understand the importance of data centers, as one of the building blocks, as much as what you guys do. I think that was a big part of where we started, and I guess part of the difficulty that we had in the beginning was trying to get people to understand that. So yeah, from your perspective, I mean, what have you seen?
Well, I mean, if you told me back in 2009 that the arrival of submarine cables in the east coast of Africa would create this huge shift and growth, I would have not believed you. Because when the cable was built in 2009, the target ultimate capacity was way below the terabit levels that we see today. So we didn't realize how much of a shift it would make. But yeah, in 2009 when SEACOM launched, I think South Africa was the first country we turned on. I was actually in Malaysia, same like you. A friend of mine called me, who had taken over, said, "You come help me build this network in 2012. I was like, "Yeah, sure." Came down, and it was a big shift because it was satellite before, and people bought satellite capacity on average for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 per meg, and the average network had about 2 to 10 meg for the satellite, especially the downward direction. So upload wasn't pretty good. So when we started, it was an STM1, which was 155 meg that you bought from SEACOM, and people didn't realize just how quickly it would go. Right. So you contract for a much longer period then when it was still IRUs, and then you realize that it's out of capacity before the server's up. And I mean, just like you guys, it was a bit of a slow start in 2009, but then we slowly began to see that pick up around 2014, 2015, when SEACOM got into delivering more capacity inside data centers of some of the enterprise markets, we began to see a huge shift in the ecosystem, specifically in South Africa and Kenya.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm sure you saw the same.
And I mean that's a good point as well. You know, it was a slow start for us in the first year, you know, because we had this concept of carrier neutral data centers and interconnection. You know?
Right.
So this is going to be the backbone of everything. You have three clients in a data center, and you know, once they're all interconnected to each other, it's like
this was Isanda, right?
This was actually, we started in Cape Town.
Oh, the Rondebosch.
Yeah,
right.
Rondebosch. And so we needed to, you know, we went to the market, and people started talking about internet exchanges back then, and said,
right,
you guys should build an internet exchange to make it that much easier for people to interconnect within the data center. And it's funny that you mentioned that little time period, because you know, we kind of only started pushing the internet exchange in 2012. Yeah, and so we had a couple of early adopters. But I want to say at that stage, because it was a sort of a new thing for us, we also didn't understand the value of it and how to drive it. You know, even though it's been a free product forever, you know, it's something that you don't have to pay to connect to. We just, you know, the most difficult thing is getting a salesperson to sell something for free. You know, so we had to change the way that we thought about it. But it was that sort of period, you know, the 2014 to 2016.
Correct. Yeah.
Where we saw things just, you know, explode basically on the internet, and it is things like that. You know, I remember you guys came up with a very compelling fiber to the business product at that stage, and I think things like that sort of, you know, they don't break the mold, but they sort of shake the market.
Yes.
And you know, people start realizing that there is more competition, and certainly from your perspective, when you brought that product out, it allowed more people to enter the market.
Yeah, there's a whole ecosystem that got built around that. In the reseller market expanded, fiber to the home, ISPs that did not have to build network and could come and buy racks and get peering at NAPAfrica. You know, they found that to be easier because, you know, that product brought the price per meg down quite a bit, even though it was still higher then than it is now, but it was much lower than it was previously. So the whole ecosystem got built out, and then we had the arrival of the content providers in a useful way. So not just network, but actually with services. And I think that also shifted the game quite a lot.
Yeah, and I know that's always a point that you've made over the years at a lot of the events that we've attended is exactly like you said. The you know, there's the arrival of the hyperscalers or the content providers was never really a sort of a full African deployment. It was just kind of network, dip your toes in the water and see.
Right.
But you know, I guess it took that time to sort of start building that business case for them.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because so we started to work with them from about 2013 and earlier.
Yeah.
When so we helped them de-risk a little bit and said, you know, we shall give you, you know, space power cooling in our landing stations, for example. And then if you give us a couple of servers, we can see how it works for customers. So you know, they began to see potential.
Yeah.
It was still a bit of a risk, but they began to see potential. But I remember, you know, you specifically and your colleague Michelle also did quite a bit of work in trying to reassure them of the potential around between 14 and 16.
Yeah.
And I think that's when they you know, they took that assurance from your team and also what they had seen from what they deployed with us and said, you know, why not? And I think, it's kind of worked pretty well, actually.
It certainly has. NAPAfrica has become, you know, a significant part of the internet, and not just in South Africa, but Southern Africa. And that, I think, is the next conversation that we always have is wherever we've gone, you know, whether it be to events or whatever the case is into Africa, we almost always get people coming to us and saying, can you come and do this in my country?
Right.
Or can I use that same model in my country? How do I get to the same point? You know, and these are the countries that are not necessarily the three key points that people traditionally look at, which is South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria. So how, you know, we keep talking about the building blocks of things, and I think this also goes back to what you were saying the product that you guys launched, which allowed other people to come. But so, if you've got 3 ISPs in the country, or two of them are run by the government, it becomes a very difficult situation. What do you see from a SEACOM perspective? Where are things working? Where are things not working? Or where is there more work to be done?
Well, I mean, so you mentioned Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. So, we find that the ecosystem builds itself naturally when the market has the right principles that facilitate that.
Yeah.
The right legislation, the right investment from government, etc., the right policies, not too expensive ISP licenses, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you find that Kenya and South Africa actually are quite leading in those areas where the economic environment is suitable for this sort of thing. Not only from our side, the providers like yourselves and us, but also, for customers to actually get involved in taking up interest in services. Other countries in Africa, for example, I'm from Uganda, so we have, different reasons why the internet hasn't developed as much there, despite being almost 50 million people. And again, it's the economic climate does not facilitate that sort of thing. And also being landlocked doesn't help either.
Yeah.
Kenya and South Africa have a coastline, as does Nigeria.
Yeah.
So it kind of helps when there's a cable landing at the coast. If you're inward, it takes a little bit more effort to get the right set of economic metrics that will help to develop that. And I think, that's just why really Kenya and South Africa are the models that are being shown to work. And other countries that are inwards tend to feed off of that, but not in a progressive way. Nigeria is a little bit different in that despite it being a large market, it really just serves itself. Okay, so Kenya, for example, is a sort of hub for East Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi. South Africa does the same for Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and so forth. But Nigeria doesn't seem to have the same impact around its neighbors. And I think, the interest for Nigeria is just mainly the sheer number of people they have, which is also fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think you need to necessarily say that Nigeria has to be a West African hub, but it would be great if it was. And there's obviously other reasons as well why we haven't seen the level of growth as we have in South Africa and Kenya, despite the size of the population.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of studies recently as well about the impact of broadband penetration, or the impact of access to the internet, and all of the various different things within the economy that it can affect, and in terms of lifestyle and business, and that sort of thing.
Right.
And I think it's kind of my feeling. And I remember back in the beginning there was a lot of displeasure with a lot of the regulation and licensing and that sort of thing. And I kind of get the feeling at the moment that is opening up in a lot of places, and certainly from countries neighboring South Africa. We just find that they're a lot more interested in what we did, how we did it, and again, those building blocks of how to put that all together, because they're looking at it and saying, well, gee, look at how much traffic is going through NAPAfrica. Look how the prices are dropping. Look at the technologies that are being adopted. I want in on that as well. And I think that sort of that success is, I kind of want to say, is spreading across the continent, which I guess is, the kind of thing that we've been saying for, since we started. And just going back to that, going back to the beginning. We started, and when we started engaging with the European and American markets, there was always this number, the magical number of 10 years. And people kept on saying they just kind of got this feeling that Africa was 10 years behind in terms of the internet and broadband and cloud and that sort of thing. And I always find it difficult to sort of understand what metrics they were using to get to that number. Way back then, in the beginning, it was easy to say, okay, well, I don't really know, because we're starting out on this journey. And so you kind of just always thought, okay, it must be that way.
Right.
And I feel it's stuck with a lot of people, where they still have this sort of idea of Africa being behind. And certainly if I have a look at from my own biased opinion about the kind of facilities that we're building, I think we're right up there, and in some cases exceed what we see in other markets. What's it like, from a SEACOM perspective in terms of what you're seeing?
Well, I think the metrics were the way they were because I think at that point it was mostly based on wireline services, copper, ADSL, or even fiber. There really wasn't a consideration for what the mobile phone could do to data and broadband penetration. And Africa is the fastest growing continent in terms of mobile penetration. And like we've said before, there's more mobile phones in every country than there are people these days. Right? So I think if you adjust the metric to account for mobile phones, and yes, maybe about only 60% of people have smartphones, I think that changes quite dramatically. And for Africa, that's going to be the primary base for the majority of the continent, because getting wired service into your home or your office is not typical in most of Africa. So I think you would have to readjust those numbers based on mobile. But I think the next phase for us, like a SEACOM, for example, now, we have Equiano that landed on the West Coast, is now developing the regional business now, developing regional interconnectivity between the African countries. I think that's the next phase, because I think the submarine side has been solved already. There's significant capacity, and once it runs out, we just add more. I think what's left now to really break down the walls and see those levels of growth that we've seen in Kenya and South Africa would be that intra-country connectivity. And I think that's where the next focus will be.
Yeah, and certainly I think that has always been I guess, like you said, that is the next problem to solve.
Exactly.
One day we're going to run out of problems to solve, but hopefully you and I will be gone by then. Just on that point about there being more cell phones than people in a lot of countries on the continent, I think what a lot of people forget, when looking at Africa, is just the sheer size of it. And getting wired services everywhere is almost impossible.
Right.
A lot of international people we speak to, even just the distance between Johannesburg and Cape Town, for example, they kind of think it's like right next to each other. But it's 1,400 kilometers away.
Right.
And if you sort of extrapolate that across Africa, you get to understand why mobile is such an important connection method.
I mean, especially because also, it's different countries, different socioeconomic policies, different languages. So it's not like Europe that has a union, and because of that, you can't homogenize the growth and development of the internet across the board. So it will be a gradual step, with that intra-connectivity between regions to sort of develop the entire continent. It's going to take a while. But the platform to do that on is definitely mobile, as you say.
Good. Okay. My last question to you, Mark, is when all these problems are solved, what are you going to do?
Find some wine on the farm somewhere.
Okay.
You?
Yeah, I haven't decided yet. I'll retire and drive my car to your wine farm.
Oh, there you go. Sounds. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
All right.